Alternative sources of energy. Introduction. The world has been overly relying on oil as a source of energy to fuel most of its operations. It is important to note that as much as 80% of the world's energy comes from fossil fuel. Unfortunately, the fossil deposits we have in the world cannot last forever. They will be depleted one day and cause a lot of problems in the world. Therefore, efforts should be made to ensure that other sources of energy are found so that when fossil fuel gets depleted, the world does not come to a halt. In this regard, many people, especially in the U.S., have been concerned with the steps that the government is taking towards encouraging development of other sources of energy. Consequently, the government has been urged to reduce restrictions impeding the development of renewable sources of energy and increase funding of the same. However, to address this issue, it is better to understand some of the sources renewable energy. Solar power. Among the proposed sources of power to be used is solar energy. Solar energy is a renewable source of energy because the sun has been there and can only be absent for a very short period of time. On the same note, harnessing of solar energy is noise-proof, which means that noise pollution is avoided when using solar power. Boxwell 58. Similarly, solar power is environmental friendly because it does not produce any form of pollution. In addition, equipments used in the production of solar power are cheap to maintain, thus the long-run cost of production is low. Moreover, it is easy and cheap to install appliances of solar power. Similarly, the electricity produced from solar energy can be used to power virtually everything that uses power. Boxwell 59. It is also important to note that the production of solar power does not lead to environmental degradation like digging up the ground or deforestation. However, solar power has its disadvantages. To begin with, some people have argued that the initial cost of installing solar power harnessing equipment is very high. Additionally, harnessing of solar power is affected by weather and cannot be done during cloudy or rainy days and at night. Therefore, another source of energy is needed to act as a backup. Boxwell 60. Wind power. On the other hand, wind energy is also another source of energy that can replace fossil fuel. Wind energy does not emit greenhouse gases which are dangerous to the environment. Furthermore, no fossil fuels are burnt to produce wind energy, thus it does not pollute the environment. Miller and Scott 407. Besides, extraction of wind energy is more efficient given the advancement in technology. The turbines used to produce wind power only occupy little space at the base, leaving room for other activities to be done on the ground. Moreover, wind energy is highly applicable in underdeveloped parts of a country and can add to the tax base of the area. In addition, renewable sources of energy, wind being among them, require minimal subsidies to maintain. On the same note, the cost of producing wind power is constant and therefore prices for wind power do not fluctuate. Most importantly, wind is free and thus cost of producing wind power is low in the long run. Miller and Scott 407. It is crucial, however, to highlight that wind power has its share of disadvantages. Firstly, wind power depends on the flow of wind. On the days when the weather is calm, wind power might not be generated. On the same note, the initial cost of producing wind power is quite high and individuals may not afford it. Miller and Scott 408. Lastly, power produced by the turbines is insufficient compared to power produced by fossil fuels. Course of action. Despite the disadvantages of wind and solar power, their advantages are definitely more. They are renewable and therefore they will never get depleted. Sooner or later the government will have to find alternative ways of producing power. Consequently, it is high time that the government increased its financial support in the production of the two types of power. Miller and Scott 407. Reduction of restrictions is necessary, but it might not be sufficient given the heavy initial cost. Similarly, renewable sources of energy, especially wind and solar power, are both economically and environmentally viable in the long run, hence the need to invest in them. Conclusion. The fact that the country currently satisfies most of its energy requirements should not blind our eyes. We will need to think of how we will operate in future. The fossil fuel that forms the giant part of energy source will definitely be exhausted with time. It will be a great disservice to the future generations if we do not find sustainable energy sources. Consequently, the government has no option but to encourage the production of wind and solar energy.